Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Joe and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to make a video explaining what interest rates are and why when we want to combat inflation, the Federal Reserve increases the interest rates in our economy. So the first part of this is just looking over what an interest rate is. And to keep it simple, an interest rate is the cost of borrowing money. Interest rates are used all over our economy. For example, when we have a car loan, a mortgage, student loans, or even just a credit card balance that we're carrying over from month to month. And the best way to explain how an interest rate affects what we pay is to look at this simple example. So let's say you're taking out a $10,000 loan for a car. It doesn't really matter what it is, but we're going to make this example a car. If the interest rate was, say, 10%, that would mean after year one, the balance that you have owed on the car is actually $11,000 because that 10% of 10,000 is 1,000. Now, if we had a 20% interest rate, then we would owe $12,000 on that car because 20% of 10,000 is 2,000. So basically what we see is that even as we pay some of the car off, a higher interest rate means that we're going to owe more money over the long term paying back this car. This has to do with anything in the economy. Anytime we see a higher interest rate, it means that us as the consumer are going to be paying more money. So now you know what an interest rate is. So now let's go over and take a look at how it's changed over the course of the history of our country and our economy. So what we see here is a chart displaying the interest rate over time. The interest rate is going to be this blue line right here, and this area that we see shaded in gray is whenever our economy is in a recession. So as we see right now, our interest rates have been pretty rapidly rising. Let me shrink this graph down, and you'll see that ever since inflation started to get really bad, early on in 2022, steadily the interest rate has gone up. Now you might wonder why this isn't a linear line, and that's because the committee that helps to determine what the interest rate is, what the federal funds rate is, only meets 8 times a year. So it can only be changed during those times, and that's why we see this line look the way that it is. But as you see over the course of history, you actually have very low interest rates over recent history, ever since the 2008 housing market crash, which obviously made our interest rates go from pretty high down to be very low, almost zero. Now, why are interest rates lower during recessions? And the simple answer to that is that because lower interest rates incentivize us to spend money and therefore the economy to grow. Because when the cost of borrowing money, when the interest rates are lower, we're more likely to spend our money. And when we spend money, we're adding money to the economy, and that overall is a good thing. But a high interest rate can also lead to high inflation because one of the causes of inflation is a lot of money being spent. So if you look at what's been happening with the pandemic and how inflation got the way it was, a lot of businesses closed down and people got their stimulus checks and they had a lot of money laying around that they didn't have before. And because there were fewer places to spend money and more money was around, it caused the cost of the things that were available to go up to meet that increased supply of money. So that's why lower interest rates supply our economy and why currently the inflation got to the situation that it is now. But let's take a look at how the federal funds rate, this federal funds rate is a targeted rate that the Federal Reserve wants to set. And you can see that that pretty much matches exactly with the fixed rate mortgage average in the US. So whenever you have a situation where the federal funds rate goes up, so does the mortgage average. Whenever it goes down, so does the mortgage average. As we go from chart to chart, you're going to see that they are very similar. Obviously not perfectly identical, but they are very similar. And that's the important part to notice. So another important part before we really get into the rest of this, as I'm going to go over to this chart, is what inflation is. And inflation is a pretty simple term, and all that it is just the cost of things going up. If you paid $5 for your 12-pack of Coke before and now it costs $6, that's inflation because you got the same amount of product, but the cost went up. That's simply what inflation is. And some inflation is actually healthy for an economy. As we see right here after the 2008 financial crash going into 2009, we did still have some inflation year over year. Typically, what you want to see is you want to see somewhere like 2%, 2.5%, somewhere around that area. Because if you're having some inflation, it typically is a good sign that your economy is going well and that you're still producing a positive GDP year over year and quarter over quarter. But as we're seeing right now, as we got into maybe the second half of 2021 and certainly to 2022, inflation really kind of started to lose control. For a long time, it was hovering around that 2% average or thereabout, lower in 2015. But as we got later on in 2021, we started seeing a pretty rapid increase. In February, we had 1.7%, March 2.6%, and then quickly that got into the 5s, into the 7s, and we saw it peak at 9.1% in June of this year. So this is annualized inflation. This is not month over month, but this is annualized inflation, because inflation is something that we're always going to look at over the course of a full year in our economy. So inflation has gone up over time, and pretty much a pretty rapid time. And to combat that, the Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates. And why do we increase interest rates when inflation is getting out of control? And the answer is pretty simple. It's because we want to have people spend less money. And the fact is that in our economy right now, a lot of people are spending money, or have spent money in the past, through loans. People buy cars through loans. People have pretty large credit card balances that they carry over from month to month. And that increases the ability for somebody to spend money that maybe they shouldn't have spent before. That's how we got into our financial crash back in 2008, 2009. People were buying houses that they probably should not have bought, shouldn't have afforded. That's a very simple explanation, and that caused people to spend, ultimately a financial crash. Very simple. That's a very simple explanation. I can go further into that in a future video, but you can find all kinds of content about that elsewhere on the internet. That's very good. So when our interest rates are going up right now, pretty much the opposite effect happens as if they're going down. When they're going down, like I said, people are more incentivized to spend their money because the cost of borrowing is so low. But when the cost of borrowing goes up, people are less likely to borrow money, and they're more likely to hold on to the money that they have, which is a very beneficial thing to combat inflation. Now, the downside can be when people aren't spending money, our economy can stop growing. And we always want our economy to grow. We want that GDP to be going positive quarter to quarter, year over year. And sometimes when you're increasing the interest rates, it can be very hard to manage that. And that's what the Federal Reserve is trying to do now. They're trying to do something called a soft landing, which is pretty much trying to alleviate the inflation concerns, while at the same time not driving the economy into a recession. Now, some people might argue that the economy is in a recession right now, and I'm not going to be going into that debate in this video. But right now, even if we are in a recession, it's not as bad as previous recessions have been. Because in previous recessions, we had mass unemployment problems, and despite what we're seeing within the tech sector with certain companies, having some pretty big layoffs, this isn't something that we're seeing in our overall economy. So if this trend is continuing and the inflation rate continues to go down, as we've seen right here, it's gone down from a peak of 9.1% year over year to 7.7%. And just in a couple weeks here, we're going to have new inflation numbers come out on December 13th. And that's something that we're going to be very excited to see, because if it goes down, that's going to be a good sign that this soft landing might actually be possible. So what we're going to see is probably interest rates continuing to go up for a little while, even if they're not going to be going up as sharply as they have. We've actually got news that the Federal Reserve is going to be considering doing smaller hikes to interest rates. So as we see right here, they've been going up by basically 0.75%, 75 points. And we've heard that this might go down to like 0.5%, 50 points, which would be a good sign that the Federal Reserve is confident that inflation is going to be coming to an end. So as just a little bit of a TLDR, TLDW, basically inflation is the cost of things going up. When you have an interest rate, that is the cost of that is the cost of borrowing money. And when it is cheaper to borrow money, people spend more money. But right now, to combat inflation, we want less money to be spent. And so in order to have that hopefully happen, we are increasing our interest rates. And when we see an increase of interest rates, that makes it more expensive to buy things and even more beneficial to save money and to hold on to your money. So if anybody has any questions or any comments that they'd like to have, feel free to put them in the description and let me know what you think about this video. I've been making some experiments with my videos, trying out different concepts, map videos, these kind of more economic, businessy videos. So yeah, let me know what you want, and if there's even any other kind of concepts you want me to get into, because I'm enjoying making videos again, and I want to continue to do so, and hopefully make some pretty good videos. So with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this. This was really fun for me to make. Hopefully it was just as fun for you to watch. And like I said, this was all a pretty simple example. I didn't get too deep into anything because I wanted to make this more accessible for everyone. If anybody wants any kind of more detailed video in the future going further into any of these concepts, I'd be really happy to do that. So let me know. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you later.